For over a decade, today's band ruled rock with an iron fist. I mean, no one could even come close to these guys. With the release of 8 epic, life-altering records, they changed the landscape of rock and roll forever, kicking out classic rock standards left and right. It all came crashing down, though, one morning in the fall of 1980 when a beloved member of the rock quartet went to sleep for the very last time. Now, some bands bring in a replacement and they go on. This band knew they couldn't. Today, we pay tribute to the legend they lost. We all lost. And celebrate his legacy by retelling his final chapter and breaking down their final album, including their plan to release a punk song under a made-up name to get the public's reaction. It's all coming up next on Professor of Rock. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you believe in rock and roll and that it can save your mortal soul,
Even rock and roll, can music save your mortal soul?
make sure that you subscribe below right now. Click the big red button. Stories straight from the legends. Click the bell so you never miss out on our interviews. Also, take a gander at our Patreon where you'll get exclusive content, full interviews that helps us keep the music alive. So on September 24th, 1980, Led Zeppelin drummer John Bonham and his assistant Rex King were driving to band rehearsals outside of London at Bray Studios. Zeppelin was preparing for an upcoming North American tour starting on the 17th of October in Montreal, Canada. It would be their first since 1977. Bonham was dreading this. He was burned out from the rock star lifestyle. John Bonham was tired of spending so much time away from his family. Now, on the way there, the two stopped off at a pub for breakfast, and this is where John Bonham ordered a few ham rolls and proceeded to wash them down with 4 quadruple vodka screwdrivers, which is about the equivalent of 40 individual shots. After arriving at rehearsals, Bonham continued his drinking binge until he was too sloshed to even sit at his drum stool. As the evening approached, it was apparent that John Bonham, Bonzo, he was in no state to play. So Robert Plant called the session. The band relocated to Jimmy Page's house to, wind down. While they were there, John came in for round 3. He drowned 3 more double vodkas. By this point, Bonzo's behavior was getting erratic, loud, and abrasive, according to those who were there. He wasn't exactly known for being a friendly drunk. For much of the night, Bonzo complained about the band's upcoming tour. Just before midnight, he crashed on the living room sofa. Page's assistant Rick Hobbs carried John upstairs to an empty bedroom, and he laid the drummer down in the bed. Hobbs turned out the light, closed the door behind him, and that was it. It was the last time anyone would see this legendary drummer alive. The next morning, September 25th, 1980, Robert Plant and John Paul Jones returned to Page's house before rehearsals. Jimmy was up and walking around, but Bonham was MIA. So tour manager Benji Lefevre and John Paul Jones headed upstairs to, rouse him. Creeping into the bedroom, Lefevre called John's name and tried to nudge him to wake him up, and there was no response. Benji shook a little harder, and then he turned John over. Bonham's face was pale and blue. He wasn't breathing, and his body was cold. Lefevre and Jones checked John's vitals and looked at each other in horror. And they just ran downstairs to tell the others. I mean, nobody could believe it. Quickly, someone called an ambulance, but everyone knew that John Bonham was gone. The coroner's report revealed that Bonham had died from a pulmonary edema. Basically, John had vomited in his sleep. He choked on it. He was too drunk to expel the massive amount of alcohol that was in his system. His death was ruled accidental or death by misadventure, just like Bon Scott of AC/DC. Said John Paul Jones about it, "We had just started rehearsing for a tour of America when Bonzo died, and it was just at the point where we had all come back together again. Bonzo had been getting a bit erratic, and I can't say he was in good shape because he wasn't. There were some good moments, during the last rehearsals, but then he started on that vodka." Plant said, on the very last day of his life, he was not quite as happy as he could be. He said, "I've had it with playing drums. Everybody plays better than me." And then he said, "I'll tell you what, when we get to rehearsal, you play the drums and I'll sing." John Bonham was in a very dark place. In hindsight, it is clear that he was crying out for help. But at the time, no one could hear him or really understand what was happening. That is until it was too late. Now, plans for Zeppelin's tour were immediately canceled. As the news spread around the world, tributes poured in and media speculation took center stage. Rumors circulated that Phil Collins, Carmine Appice, or Bev Bevan were frontrunners to replace Bonzo. But, behind closed doors, Robert Plant, Jimmy Page, John Paul Jones, manager Peter Grant, and a few close crew members, they met for one final band meeting. Unanimously, they agreed that Led Zeppelin was done, was finished. The band then released the following statement that read, "The loss of our dear friend and the deep respect we have for his family, together with the sense of undivided harmony felt by ourselves and our manager, have led us to decide that we could not continue as we were." It was as simple as that. Without John Bonham, there was no Led Zeppelin. In just over a decade's time, over the span of 8 albums, Led Zeppelin had risen to become one of the most influential bands of the rock era, if not the most influential. To many, the greatest of all time. The months following John Bonham's death were a dark time for his bandmates and his friends. Jimmy Page was so devastated that he put his music career on hold for almost 2 years. "I didn't even touch the guitar," he said. "I was shattered. I lost a very, very close friend." He didn't pick up a guitar for several years. And yet the band was still contractually bound to release just one more album, since the remaining 3 members had no desire to write or perform without John Bonham. They decided to compile a record of unreleased material and rarities. Perhaps as an act of catharsis, Jimmy Page took the lead. He overdubbed and mixed at his studio in Cookham, Berkshire, initially called Early Days and Latter Days. The album would ultimately be named the brief but apt Coda. The word coda is a musical term designating the conclusion of a piece of work or body of work, and that really says it all. Coda brought together years of Zeppelin outtakes and outliers, some of which showcased John Bonham at his very best. Jimmy Page's aim was to create it as a highlight of Zeppelin's discography. He said, "I wanted to make Coda the mother of all codas. I wanted to make it such a celebration of the group and all its quirkiness and all its directness." Well, that's what this Coda is, end of quote. But Jimmy Page would also admit that producing the record was more complicated than he had actually anticipated. In fact, Jimmy Page would say, and I've got to read this quote exactly. He said, "People say, what was the most difficult album?" And that was it. It was a posthumous album. You're going to be using studio outtakes because we didn't have anything else in the can. It wasn't like we had an album in the can to go. Of course we didn't. Far from it. It was what it was. But it wouldn't have gone out if I hadn't thought that it had a place. As we continue to break down Zeppelin's final album, I do want to thank this episode's sponsor, Bubs Naturals. Yeah, I've been religious about adding collagen protein powder from Bubs Naturals to my daily diet for 5 months now, since a friend turned me on to this. And the increase in my energy level and my productivity, it's made me such a happier person. I started taking Bubs Naturals collagen protein because I wanted to get healthy. And your health ultimately starts with what you put in your body. It made sense to me that nutrients are only as good as your body's ability to absorb them. It's all about sealing the gut so that you absorb all the valuable nutrients and not allow harmful particles to leak into your bloodstream. That's where the collagen protein comes in. It helps to seal and restore intestinal lining. Bubs Naturals Collagen also has 7 of the 8 essential amino acids that the body can't build on its own. We need those amino acids as the building blocks of protein. You can turn back the clock on aging with this. Die young as late as possible with Bubs Naturals Collagen. Click on the link below and use the Professor promo, the code to get a 20% discount on your purchase. So Coda was released 2 years after Bonham's death, actually. It was on November 19th, 1982. There was really no fanfare and little in the way of marketing. It was a quiet conclusion for a band who had raged like a thunderstorm across the world. But Coda wasn't actually Zeppelin's first trip to the vaults. In fact, on multiple occasions, the band had used older, unreleased material to round out new albums. For example, we've talked about it before, but Zeppelin dusted off 7 older songs to use for the 15-track Physical Graffiti. However, this practice meant that when it was time to assemble Coda, the band had already picked over the best of their unreleased material for the most part. Coda was in essence another trip to the well, and the well was kind of running dry. Several of these tracks had previously been passed over for inclusion on an album. Not once, but actually multiple times. That being said, though, This is still Led Zeppelin we're talking about here. The final track listing would be presented in almost chronological order. To kick it off, the band chose We're Gonna Groove, an adaptation of Ben E. King's 1964 B-side, Groovin'.
We're gonna groove. Yeah, groove. We're gonna groove. Yeah, groove.
We're Gonna Groove had been used to open a number of Zeppelin concerts between January and April of 1970, before the legendary Immigrant Song took command of the slot. We're Gonna Groove was originally intended for a spot on Led Zeppelin II, actually. And there are two Zeppelin versions of the song. The first was recorded at Morgan Studios in London on June 2nd of 1969. The second version was recorded live at the Royal Albert Hall in London. That was on January 9th of 1970. This is the version that would land on Coda. Page not only eliminated the crowd noise to finish the track, but he also added some guitar overdubs. Now the second track, Poor Tom, that was lifted from sessions for Zeppelin III. Composed during Page and Plan's sojourn to Brann-Yr-Aur, it was in the spring of 70. It was recorded a short time later at Olympic Studios in London. That was on June 5th. With the amount of acoustic material on Led Zeppelin III, it's not surprising that it was passed up for inclusion. Poor Tom was adapted from a traditional song. It tells the sad tale of Tom, who has worked on the railroads for 30 years. His wife, Annie Mae, is unfaithful and can't seem to keep her dress down, as they say. As that story comes to a close, Tom guns down Annie Mae for kind of an unhappy ending there. Very interesting song. Track 3, I Can't Quit You, Baby. Love the song. It was already released on Zeppelin's debut album. This placement, however, is a live version of the song, taken from the same performance as We're Gonna Groove that we just talked about. It was first listed as a rehearsal in the original liner notes. And also, like We're Gonna Groove, the recording was edited to remove the crowd noise. I Can't Quit You, Baby was written by Willie Dixon and initially recorded by Otis Rush in 1956.
Well, you know, I can't quit you, baby.
It's a blues standard that has been covered by a long list of artists, including the Yardbirds. There's also John Lee Hooker, the Rolling Stones, Sammy Hagar. And there was a version by William Shatner as well.
You know it hurts way down inside.
Zeppelin's take is a note-for-note copy of Otis Rush's Vanguard version, although with different instrumentation. Track 4, Walter's Walk, that was recorded during the Houses of the Holy sessions in the spring of 1972 at Stargroves. The song is a blend of elements from two different eras in Zeppelin's history. One while Bonham was still alive and another after his death. It began as a rhythm track for an instrumental that came from Jimmy Page's guitar improv. This is while the band was on tour in 1972, and likely remained a demo until Plant recorded some vocals for it in time for Coda. Jimmy would add some guitar overdubs as well. More than any song on Coda, the Walter's Walk showcases Zeppelin at their heaviest. It's a full-on, all-out hard rock and spectacular. John Bonham turning in some hard-hitting drum work. So moving on to side 2, the second half of Coda contains 3 outtakes from Zeppelin's otherwise final offering, In Through the Outdoor, and one extended Bonham drum solo to boot. It begins with Ozone Baby, that was recorded in November 1978 at ABBA-owned Polar Studios in Stockholm, Sweden. Ozone Baby never made it onto a live set, at least not in its entirety. Its riff would sometimes appear during performances of Dazed and Confused, though.
Been dazed and confused for so long, it's not true.
Ozone Baby has the general tone of a rock song, but with a sound that is more in keeping with the late 70s and the emergence of new wave, really. Although it doesn't feature Jones on keys, very uncharacteristic of an In Through the Outdoor track. The lyrics basically have Plant telling a lady stalker, possibly a groupie, to shove off. Don't want you wasting my time, tired of you doing the things that you do. It's no use standing in the line, follow the line, you better follow cue. Clearly, Robert Plant has better things to do, like sailing. I could sail a river run dead. I could cry within the darkness. I sail away, I save a lifetime forever. So track 6 is Darlene, another Polar Studio song and another song Zeppelin never played live. This upbeat rock and roller begins with a short but powerful guitar-driven intro, and then quickly it gets down to business. Lyrically, the song is something of a counterpoint to Ozone Baby. Later in the song, Robert Plant is overcome by jealousy, confessing that when he sees her walking with all those guys, it makes him feel so sick. Robert Plant also makes a reference to a pink carnation in a pickup truck, a direct quote from Don McLean's American Pie.
With a pink carnation and a pickup truck. I got a pink carnation and a pickup truck.
And for those keeping score at home, that's actually 2 references to American Pie. Track 7, Bonzo's Montreux, is a John Bonham special. A drum extravaganza that is the most obvious tribute to the Zeppelin drummer on Coda. The piece was recorded at Mountain Studios in Montreux, Switzerland. Happened in September of '76. Said Page, John was alone in Montreux at the time, so I went there to cheer him up. As the two began to play around with ideas, the concept of a percussion orchestra emerged. In 1981, when the Coda project came along, there was no doubt in Jimmy Page's mind that Bonzo's Montreux had to be included. For Page, it was the backbone of this album, and there couldn't be anything better than having a drum orchestra of John Bonham. The final track is very interesting, track 8, Wearing and Tearing. This is Led Zeppelin's answer to punk rock. The third Coda track recorded at Polar in November of '78. It's by far the most aggressive song recorded at that time. According to Robert Plant, it was omitted from In Through the Outdoor because the rest of the album was so light, it just wouldn't have fit. Wearing and Tearing was 1, 2, 3, 4 charge. It was like an assault. It wasn't in character with something like All My Love. So for those who don't know, Wearing and Tearing was supposed to be released as a promotional single at the 1979 Nebworth Festival. It was headlined by Led Zeppelin, of course. But it was stalled thanks to production issues. And get this is the funniest part. Led Zeppelin considered releasing it under a fake band name, something akin to the Sex Pistols or the Damned. You know, they just wanted to see what kind of reaction that this song would get. I guess the plan never saw the light of day. That would have been so cool. I wonder what the punk name was. Try to guess below in the comments. In addition to the tracks originally compiled for Coda, I do want to mention a couple of glaring omissions. Traveling, Riverside Blues, and Hey Hey What Can I Do? These, along with White Summer, Black Mountainside, and Baby Come On Home, They, of course, would later find a spot on the 1993 compact disc edition, and in years to come, there would be other rarities that would surface on Coda's deluxe edition, bonus disc. But for today, I want to highlight just these two songs. Travelin' Riverside Blues was recorded by the legendary Robert Johnson during his final recording session that happened on June 20th, 1937.
Let's come on back to fried fun, mama.
Zeppelin, for their part, added it to the mix fairly early on. Their version for the complete BBC sessions dates to June 24th, 1969. Robert Plant's lyrics are similar to Robert Johnson's, including a suggestive Lemon reference, which also turns up in the Lemon song, nearly word for word, actually.
Squeeze my lemon till the juice runs down my leg.
Curiously, Zeppelin originally had no plans to record the song. Jimmy Page explained, what happened was we'd play 2 or 3 Zepp things and the producers wanted one more track, so we recorded that cover. We did it in one go. One single take, just like that. And we forgot all about that song until the bootleggers came with it. They came out with it, and at that point, the speculation started. Was Travelin' Riverside Blues a forgotten track off the second album? Before finding its way on the Coda 1993 edition, the band included it on their 1990 box set. Let me know if you think I should do a deep dive on this one. It's interesting. It's definitely a Zeppelin hidden gem. As for Hey Hey What Can I Do, we've covered that.
My, she looks so fine. She's the only one that
It's a semi-acoustic rock country blend that has a very breezy and mellow vibe, one of my favorite Zeppelin songs. Page opens the song with an acoustic riff and is then joined by Bonham on drums and Jones on bass. Jones also plays a mandolin on the track. Initially, it was recorded with the intention of releasing it as a single, which was unusual because Zeppelin only issued few singles throughout the run. However, Hey Hey What Can I Do was instead chosen as the B-side of Immigrant Song, one of the greatest A-side, B-side cuts records ever. Hey Hey What Can I Do? It never made it onto Zeppelin III. It's not exactly clear why. Some have argued that musically it didn't fit with the other tracks or that maybe it was too commercial, for Zeppelin's taste. But whatever the reason, this made it scarce. Other than the Immigrant Song single and an Atlantic Records sampler, if you wanted to hear this song, you'd have to catch it on classic rock radio. Its rarity, of course, just increased its demand, making it perhaps the most sought-after Zeppelin hidden gem of all time. As I said in our full piece on Hey Hey What Can I Do, I think it would have been a #1 hit if they would have released it at the time it was written. Where Zeppelin had written a song that was as good as any of the legendary singer-songwriters of the times that were topping the charts or doing really well. Cat Stevens, James Taylor. Even released here on Coda, it would have been the album's crown jewel. As it was, the world would have to wait roughly a decade after Coda for another release. So Coda, it was a success. It went to #6 on the Billboard Albums chart in the US. Internationally, it reached #18 in Norway. It went to #16 in Japan. Went to #7 in New Zealand. And in their homeland, it went to #4 in the UK. It would be the only Led Zeppelin album not to go multi-platinum, though 1 million+ records still ain't half bad. Though absent any official singles, Coda saw 3 of its songs reach the top 20 on the Billboard mainstream rock chart. Poor Tom came in at #18, Ozone Baby went to 14, and Darlene went to #4. Clearly people were still hungry for Zeppelin. So the band released 9 albums in their run, and 8 of the 9 were multi-platinum. This was the only album that Zeppelin released that failed to sell at least 3 million copies. But to be fair, it is a compilation album. Beyond that, though, Coda is a stark reminder of the end of the world's heaviest band. And it makes you wonder what might have transpired had Bonzo lived. To that end, Jimmy Page revealed that he and John Bonham had talked about Zeppelin's next album, after In Through the Outdoor. Both had felt the keyboard-centric record, In Through the Outdoor, it was just too soft. And for their next outing, they needed to record something heavy. Said Page, Bonham loved playing this sort of stuff. So we definitely would have done some guitar-driven riff things because he loved all that and because we'd just done a keyboard album. But of course, fate took an unexpected turn for this band, and that hypothetical record never saw the light of day. Over the last month, we've lost some pretty heavy hitters in music. On September 25th, 1980, we lost the heaviest hitting drummer in all of rock and roll history. And in turn, we lost the heaviest band of all time. But their music still shakes the earth off its axis. Thanks so much for watching. Leave us a comment about Led Zeppelin and Bonzo John Bonham. What's your take on Coda? What's your favorite track? Is there a better drummer out there than John Bonham? Neil Peart, maybe. But it's a toss-up. If you like our content, we do invite you to subscribe below. Let us know what other Zeppelin stuff you'd like to see. I never get tired of talking about this incredible band. Until next time, 3 chords.